Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers, John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Thursday, June 26, 2025, out of the Matrix into Prime Reality. Thank you for joining us on X, Rumble, and YouTube. It's great to see you all in the live chat. And I'm going to say this right off the bat. If you are someone who is afraid of physical death, if that thought is horrifying to you, if you don't want to think about it, please turn off this show right now. This is not going to be for you. But if you're someone who is inspired beyond the physical body, who can imagine scenarios and the future in various ways, and who knows that we're so much more than this body, then this is exactly for you, because we need you. I have, like I said, I have decades of research in me. And one thing that has become crystal clear over these decades of research is that the governments around the world, and we are usually only seeing, even in the conspiracy arena, most of the focus is on what the American government, military, intelligence community, black programs and whatnot are doing. But the truth is, it's happening everywhere. And I'll show you a few clips. Some you might have seen those, but this is one that's become famous, but would have been much more famous in all the world if we didn't have September 11th, 9/11, because this clip was recorded at a press conference on September 10th, and it was then the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, who said this here. Let's watch this together.
They say, tangled in our anchor chain. Our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions. We cannot, as they say.
Sorry, this was the most important part, and you can forget the rest. We cannot account for 2.3, and then later was $3 trillion. That was in 2001. The Pentagon, the defense arm of the United States, could not account for trillions of dollars. Let's quickly recap what trillion means. 1 trillion is 1,000 billions. 1,000 billions, and 1 billion is 1,000 millions. So we're talking about an astronomical amount of money that they couldn't account for. Of course, next day 9/11 happens. We never really hear about this again, except for conspiracy documentaries and people that pay attention to these kinds of things. But after 9/11, the real explosion into these black budgets happened. And in recent months, you've heard, and you know her, Catherine Austin Fitts. She's been around for a while, a whistleblower, because she was a part of the George Bush Jr. administration. And she said this here. Let's watch this clip together. I think it's very interesting. About 3 minutes. Let's watch this.
Kept going missing. I kept covering it for many years. And so a process began. The largest amount that went missing in any year was in 2015, 6.5 trillion. And a professor from Michigan State University heard me talking about it and said, what can I do to help? And I had him and his students do a survey of DOD, the two agencies where the majority of money had gone missing. And he came back and found 21 trillion missing. I had it up to 12 trillion, and he increased it by 9 trillion. And essentially, what everybody says, well, where's the money going? And we can engage in conjecture on that. But clearly part of the problem was that trying to finance the black budget and a whole parallel universe of sort of weaponry and intelligence and military infrastructure was getting more and more painful. When 9/11 happened, they passed the Patriot Act. That made it much easier to get on budget money into the black budget, but it kept ballooning. And literally, the way some of us describe it is it was enough money to fund a separate civilization. Essentially people saying we can't operate within this democratic machinery. We have to fund and build a secret infrastructure outside the government. So we called it the breakaway civilization. And literally, you funded a very significant infrastructure. And one way of looking at what's happening now is the breakaway civilization is breaking back in.
And how does it manifest itself, this breakaway civilization? How can we recognize that? How is it being built?
So, for example, in 3 years ago, I sat down and I spent 2 years with one of the best researchers I know, and we tried to estimate how many underground bases there were just in the United States alone and in the oceans immediately outside of the United States. We estimated 170. And that, of course, is the platform for all sorts of activities that you want to keep secret, including some of the things you may or may not be doing in space. And there was a wonderful group. There were 2 people at the Washington Post, I think, 2010, 2012, that did a big study. They made a database of all the secret facilities and all the facilities that had been financed through the Patriot Act or after the Patriot Act. It was called Top Secret America. And you saw this enormous explosion of money going for these activities. And part of the thing to understand, Paul, is this explosion of secret and invisible activities the money is not often spent productively, and you get an enormous corporate infrastructure which is financially dependent on this money. And then you get huge lobbyists and constituents depending on this money. And the next thing you know, everybody's in the defense and the national security business, and everybody's making money from secrecy. And it was very.
So this is Catherine Austin Fitts talking about this number, $21 trillion that went into black budgets. So the question is, what is this money being spent on? She talks about underground bases. We know there are a undisclosed amount of facilities, mountain facilities, underground structures that crisscross entire nations. We know there are bases literally underneath the oceans. I think we know there are bases on this satellite body called the moon. There's so much going on, and the more time that you spend tracking those activities, the more you realize that the larger amount of activities is going into these secret projects. And what we're seeing is basically a theatrical version of governance for the most part, I think. But the question is why? Why are they doing this? And I have, I've told you as a researcher, I have researched AI quite a bit. And one of the things that I did, and I wanted to see what it would come up with in its analysis, I spent half a day feeding it data on all these activities that I could verify. What we could find and what was sort of out there confirmed. And then I said, what is the most likely conclusion? What is this activity for? And what it came up with was that there is a preparation for an event that would most likely affect large sections of the world. It could be a natural disaster. It could be a solar disaster. It could be any kind of geophysical event, a pole shift event. But that clearly all these activities point to secret preparation for something. And, whether you look at it through the mathematical lens and the chronological lens, like some are, and that are seeing patterns that repeat in history, or whether you're looking at it from a pole shift event. And we've talked about this with Frank Jacob on the air, where the North Pole is moving at a very fast rate. And that when this happened in the past, there were catastrophic events. So in other words, you could say that all governments must prepare to a certain degree for such unexpected event and have a contingency plan in place. What we're seeing is so much preparation, so much unusual activities, so much secrecy, that it would rather seem that they're preparing not for a potential event, but for a more certain event that might be in this generation and even sooner, maybe within a few years. Let's just assume for a moment that that is the case. What would they all be doing? They would clearly preserve whatever needs preserving, create systems for afterwards. But most importantly, and this is what steers the world and has been steering the world, is the programs that would be introduced into the new world. We see today, we can go to artifacts, we can go to things that we find in caves, that we find deep underground, and we can deduct from that that past civilizations were very advanced, maybe more advanced than we are in some ways, and that they left knowledge, wisdom, and clues behind. However, we are clearly not living with that wisdom. We're living against that wisdom. And we're living in a technocratic society that, in my estimation, the reason why this rush is going on with the technological developments and with the building is because I believe this is the system that is supposed to rule after a reset event. Whether that reset event happens to be catastrophic, a catastrophic natural event, or something else, I don't know that, but this is my best guess. And there's sort of a butchered, rushed timeline. So the question here is, what could be our role in all of this? Now, I'll say this, very clearly. There's a very good chance that in the case of such an event, that many of us wouldn't survive it. And one aspect is preparing for that kind of survival. What could that entail? Where would be the best spots for that? What would you have to do to make that happen? And that's one aspect. But the more important aspect to me is, if past resets and catastrophic events have caused forgetfulness, almost amnesia about the truth, and then it would take hundreds of years to build that up again, what could we possibly do to preserve the truths that we have been finding, the wisdom that we have been rediscovering for the aftermath, right? And I think this is not just a valid field of work and research and activity. I think that this should happen all over the world in a more coordinated way. And some people are doing this. Actually, I would say more people than not in the research community that are serious are looking for ways to preserve the findings because they realize something's on the horizon. Now, I'm not saying it's a certainty, because I can't say that it's a certainty. I simply don't have that kind of data in front of me where I would say, hey, I know this is going to happen. Others claim that. And I neither want to dispute their claims nor confirm them. I don't know, but I have a sense that we have already seen over the last years a heightened activity. And I don't think we can all chalk it off as that's all just engineered and fake. Maybe not. Maybe this entire construct is producing certain events. And coincidentally, of course, there are no coincidences, but it's funny actually that while I was preparing this show today, just a couple of hours ago, there was apparently a meteor that came down somewhere close to here, was seen over the southeastern sky here in the United States. They're still looking for whether it made impact, but it's very rare that you see sort of the sky light up with a meteor during the day, and that happened. So the fundamental question is, what can we do? I see our role of our generation, yes, to make the best possible life that we can, which is part of this, and to be the best possible version, but also to be keepers of wisdom and truth, and to make it last longer, so future generations don't have to start from scratch again, right? And they can actually pick up where we might have left off. So here's some of the things that people could be thinking about, thinking about how you could build something like a time capsule with your family, for example. So in other words, all the digital data that we are gathering, I believe, won't be worth much. Now, there might be some instances where we can preserve digital data and save it, and that's part of a strategy. But, it would seem that, at least to the best of my knowledge, we haven't found much digital data from thousands of years ago from those civilizations. We seem to find tablets. We seem to find carvings. We seem to find scrolls and those kinds of things, but not digital data. So maybe we need to rethink our strategy with the time capsule thing and the preservation of knowledge. So here are just some ideas. I encourage you to save this video, screenshot these things, discuss them. Things like etching, wisdom on stainless steel or titanium or stone. They clearly, when they built the Georgia Guidestones, they were clearly thinking of something. They didn't put it on paper. They put it in rock, right? And here are just some of the things that people can or could be doing. And this is not something that is only for researchers or people that have historic knowledge. There's a chance that you have knowledge and wisdom in a particular field that is very valuable and that ought to be preserved in some way, shape, or form. It used to be sort of a tradition in many families that, let's say, attached to their family Bible, they would have a family book where important things about the family were written into that book. Not just important things about the family, but certain family members would share truth, wisdom, stories, something that would inform future generations of where do I come from? What did my ancestors do? But also maybe truths about history that wasn't what you could find in a history book, right? Because it was written by people on the ground who lived it rather than by the winners of a war that rewrote history to fit their narrative. So those are all things that are not new, but our generation is forgetting all about it because we hold these devices and they provide a convenience in the moment, but nothing lasts on these devices. With the loss of electricity and EMP or something like that, we lose everything. I mean, most of you remember a time where you knew 50 phone numbers by heart. You knew your grandmas, your uncles, your cousins. You knew the numbers for your work. I mean, you knew that. How many numbers do you know by heart now? How many phone numbers? How many, you still know your childhood phone number. You still know your grandma's house phone number, but you don't know your best friend's phone number now. And this is what has happened, right? So it is a strategic kind of thinking that we need to adopt here for this. Time capsules are, you've seen that, the people do that in every generation. They take a trove or something like that, and then they put stuff in there that they think people 50, 70, 100 years from now will be interested in. But this is more than that. This is about the preservation of what we have been finding. For example, one truth that has emerged and that has gotten a lot of attention over the last years and decades is the rediscovery that we might be living in some sort of artificial construct, or at least an artificial overlay, that this is not what we might call prime reality, that this literally is a matrix, a electromagnetic overlay, a grid, a digital holograph. I mean, we are exploring all of this, but even the exploration of this needs to be documented, even though we might not be able to say things with certainty yet, but we at least have to document what we have found so far and what has guided us to these observations. That needs to be preserved. Think about a future after reset program, a governance program, if you will, that is fully AI driven, technocratic, and very tightly controlled from our perspective. What would such people need to see, hear, read, blueprints for sovereign living, for self-sufficiency? We still have this as a concept, as a memory, but the generation to come might not have that. They simply might not even think of those things because it's not part of their experience any longer. So it is so important, right? With every generation, we lose so much knowledge unless it's preserved. Even within the last 50, 60, 70 years, if I think about my grandmother, there wasn't a time in her life where she didn't have a garden, where she didn't know how to grow food, where she didn't know how to do those basic things. Kristin's grandmother knew a an herb for every ailment that there is, everything. She knew where to go, where to pick it, how to use it, prepare it. Today, this generation is slowly finding that again, yes, but there's a large section that doesn't even think about that any longer. Like it's so far away because their only option is the doctor, the pharmacy, the whatever. They don't even think that nature provides this in abundance, healing in abundance. So, imagine if hundreds or thousands of people all over the world, or tens of thousands of people, would start with just noting these things, writing them down, all their findings, and then finding a way to preserve this in time capsules and in other ways, etched in stone. I mean, wouldn't that be worthwhile? What tremendous projects those could be. And there's just a few ideas that we put down here. But of course, and this is what we do every day, truth must live in people. Because when it is in people and when it is in their minds and in their hearts, it also is readily available in the field. Now, this is a metaphysical principle, but we talk about the morphic or morphogenetic field, which is the underlying consciousness field that holds the information that we feed into it and that our ancestors fed into it. And so if dominant images are in that field, others can pick them up easier. And this is also what sort of plays into the 100th monkey effect, where if a certain number of people internalize and embody something, a new piece of information, new knowledge, that after a certain amount of people embody it, it starts trickling out to the rest without them having to actually learn it. It's so the consciousness field informs the rest. People are saying that this concept has been disputed, but in the animal kingdom, it's been tested and proven quite a few times. And I would say that my own personal observation has been that 20 years ago, when we were talking about all the subjects that we talk about today, there was a slow learning curve in people, wrapping their minds around it, being able to grasp these concepts. There was a lot of resistance, and it was sort of a linear way. In recent years, people have made quantum leaps in comprehension, awakening, understanding that we have never seen before. So what makes those quantum leaps happen? Clearly, we are in a feedback loop with the consciousness field, and the more people that grasp certain concepts, the more people can grasp them much faster, much easier. So I think there is maybe a mathematical concept in the construct. Maybe it's something encoded into our DNA. I don't know, but it's definitely happening. So we need to talk to each other, continue to share the stories, continue to share the wisdom, continue to spread that, so it is dominant in people and dominant in the field. This is probably the most important one. Here's a big contradiction in today's show. I'm saying, hey folks, there's a good chance that within a few years, maybe 7, 5, 20, 15, we don't know, but within the next decade or maybe 2, that there will be a catastrophic event that might wipe out a lot of people in the world and a lot of what was built in the civilization. And at the same time, I'm telling you, what you should really do, in my perception, is to be the best possible version of you, to build the most amazing life. And you say, but why would I do that if I know I'm not going to be here? What would I do this for? That's exactly what for. See, necessity and urgency, they create 2 kinds of reactions. Either defeat, where people just go, oh no, I can't deal with that, and they just retrieve and go into their hole and do nothing, and choose to be victims of circumstances. Or necessity and urgency can unleash an incredible amount of energy, and people become more creative. They live up, they level up, they become the best possible version of themselves. They come up with things that they couldn't before. all of the greatest positive innovations that we've seen, positive things that people have created, most of those things were created from a space of urgency. A solution was needed. There was a crisis, a challenge, a problem, something that necessitated a solution. And all of a sudden, what does this process do? When you have urgency, when something needs to be solved, when creative people go into a very, very specific space, and by creative people, I mean anyone who acknowledges the creator within. That's not artists, it's anyone that acknowledges the creator within. And the space that people go in is they subtract everything that is noise, everything that doesn't matter, everything that doesn't help with the solution, push it away. All the stuff that they usually do or watch or whatever, and say, none of this matters, none of this helps. And they focus on everything that contributes to the solution, and they pull it in like a magnet. They pull those components, people, everything that's needed in like a magnet. That's the kind of urgency and I think necessity. That's the kind of situation that we're actually in, regardless of whether you think there is such an event coming or not. We are in this urgency situation. And this is why I keep saying the best possible thing that anyone can do is become the best possible version of you. Like literally. And think about, what would you like to inform future generations of? What imprint would you like to leave behind? A life that shows health, beauty, vitality, balance, harmony, love, joy, creation, or a life that shows despair and sadness and depression and hatred? Like, what would that be? If you forget the legacy stuff, like that people pay so much attention to, like what's going to be on my tombstone. Think about the energetic imprint that each spirit, each soul leaves behind. What is that energetic imprint that you want to leave behind? You know, what is it that you want others that come after us to pick up here? That's the kind of energy. And this is, you know, people could watch this and say, this guy's completely nuts. What's he talking about? But this is the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. This is the kind of inspiration that drives me through the greatest challenges of my own life. It's literally that. What can we do now to improve things as much as we can here, but to also improve things tremendously for everyone that's to come? And I want to point to the principle of the seventh generation that was very, very well known and lived among most Indians here in the United States. Or, I mean, before it was the United States, I should say. And that the seventh generation, and I think specifically very often taught in the Lakota traditions, is that each choice that is made is measured by how it will affect the seventh generation after them. And they're counting 7 full lifetimes. So that might be potentially 700 years. So they're saying, if our clan, if our people make this decision, how will it affect the 7th generation to come? This is the kind of thinking that I'm inspired by. This is the kind of, you know, this is what changes programs. This is what changes systems, what changes potentially worlds. And this is the kind of sort of courage that we need to have in these times when we make choices and decisions. We are not just sort of encapsulated individual vessels. We're connected to the whole. And all of our intentions and creations should always have that in mind, that we're not just you and me separately. We're also connected to everything. So all of these things need to be preserved. All of these findings need to be passed on. And we need to find a way to give it to people in story, in song, in culture, but also to put it on something that is solid, you know, something that will survive a flood, survive a fire, survive any kind of disaster, and inform the future generations. And you know, here's, like I said, I just put up a few things that might make sense. What we can do: bury things, find caves, mountains. I mean, there's all kinds of places that we could put these things. And let's say you're, you know, maybe you're building a house, or you have a construction site, or you I don't know, you're doing something in your backyard and you have a hole. Well, dig it just a little bit deeper, put something down there that might be found by future generations. I really think, and people are doing this, by the way, I really think we're called to do that. We are, and we should, and that should be part of our focus. And there's another thing here too, is that when we focus on these things more, we get sharper. So part of that urgency and necessity deal is, like I said, is you focus on what needs to be done, and you leave out the rest, all the crap that doesn't matter. I watch entire systems. I observe patterns. Kristin and I, that's, I think, our best field. That's where we shine, where we naturally shine the most, where we have the most experience in, is to observe and analyze systems and patterns. So when I observe the totality of behaviors and actions of governments, for example, militaries and whatnot in the world, this is the conclusion: that there is a preparation going on, and it's, I think, largely already concluded, most of it, and that what we're seeing is largely movies, theatrics. Not that there aren't real things happening. Of course, there are real things happening, but all of this seems to be distraction events, making a lot of noise all the time, so that, you know, we don't rebel, do something else while all of this is happening in the background. And I'm not calling for, by the way, I'm not calling for a violent revolution or rebellion or revolt. I'm not, because I don't think that solves anything. I think that will just replace one system with a similar system. It's a revolution of the mind, of the spirit, of the heart. It's a commitment to truth that is more important than physical survival. It's more important than saving my life, your life, any life. The truth is more important than a physical body. It shouldn't be compromised for anything. And those are the kinds of alchemists and truth warriors and lighthouses that are in our community, that are out there, that we need. People that see beyond the veil, beyond this world, beyond this physical 3D programming, and that know that we can create from a higher place. So, you know, this is what this is about. I would encourage you, please bookmark this, save it, share it with your friends and family. Come together. If you have a few like-minded people, meet and think about what would be worth preserving for a future generation. What would they need to know? It's the same thing as, you know, I don't want to put some negative juju on anything here, but let's say somebody discovers that they're not healthy anymore. They have a sickness, an illness, and it most likely will lead to the end of the physical body within a year or two. What would you really want your children or your grandchildren to know? Like, what would be the thing that matters the most to you? What would you put down in a diary? Make sure that they read it, that they know it, that they get this. This is what I tell myself almost every day, is when we show up for everything that we do, is what matters. What's the signal? Not the noise, not the crap. What really matters? What's the core of this? And it is intense. And sometimes I get that. Sometimes people just want to chill. And there's nothing wrong with that. But a certain amount of our focus needs to go into this. We need to preserve the truth, because the folks that are running the other show, that's the last thing that they worry about. It's about control, power, how they extract more energy, but it's not about the truth. So that's our job. Friends, I also wanted to let you know that we're loving the influx of wonderful people that are coming and signing up for this After Awakening retreat that's happening July 12th and 13th. Our team's excited. The connected Telegram group is starting to get more traction. People that sign up for the After Awakening retreat are getting access to that. It's going to be an online retreat July 12th, July 13th, specifically for people that find themselves in a rut, in unmotivated, uninspired after awakening. You know, for some people it's a decade after they woke up. For some people it's a year after they woke up, but it is a difficult space to be in that we've all been in. And the people that are looking for a perspective shift, something that ignites their heart, their souls, their spirits again, and that makes sense, that seems truthful and authentic. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to meditate. We're going to go deep within. We're going to do breath work. We're going to shift the energy. And it's all going to be done in a way that you can replicate later on, something that you can do every day. We are not the ones who are going to do this, who are going to make the shift happen for you. We're just going to be there to guide through this experience of 2 days, but it's you. And when you show up and when you feel called to show up for this, it's going to be a transformative experience and you're going to have the tools to keep it going. So that's July 12th and 13th, afterawakeningretreat.com if you want to learn more. If you feel it in your spirit, in your heart, if you feel called to show up, we'd love to have you. If you say, no, this is not for me, totally fine. Totally fine. No pressure, my friends. All right. Well, thank you for being here with us. Always an always an expansion. And my friends, we love you. We appreciate you. And we will be back with you again very, very soon.
Your environment shapes everything, your thoughts, your health, your energy. But most people never question the invisible field they live in. We did. And that's when FLFE found us. It's not a product, it's a field of pure life force energy that lifts everything it touches. We now live in it 24/7, and we would love to invite you to experience it too. Start your free 15-day trial now. No pressure, no strings attached. Just the truth, resonance, and peace.